Artillery Quays. And actually, I think you got a visit, Steve, didn't you, from the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, recently, which may well have moved him to, or at least be motivated to table this particular motion. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
So just remind us of your current situation, if you would, Steve.
Thank you. So we're in Royal Artillery Quays, and we have a potential £30 million cladding bill. So that would equate to £40,000 for each of the 418 flats to pay. And on top of that, we've got waking watch costs of around £6,000 per year, and an insurance hike due in March. So there's some significant cost here.
And as for that insurance hike, I mean, I've heard some fairly scary estimates. Have you been given any idea of what your premium might increase by?
Not yet, although we had a fairly ominous letter warning us of the fact that there's not a lot of competition in the market because insurance providers in general don't want to take on this risk. But if you have a look on various other developments, we're looking at increases between 600 and 1,000%. So a nightmare, really.
And you've mentioned their waking watch, which is obviously the payment that you're having to make as a leaseholder to somebody to literally stay awake all night and watch for any signs of fire. Is that correct?
Yes. Whether they stay awake all night is another point of contention, but they are being paid to do that. But we are told that will decrease the risk of our, risk of fire. However, the insurance industry don't seem to take that into account. They seem to still think it's worth putting up the premiums. Yes.
And with regard to the style of cladding at Royal Artillery Quays, is it the dangerous type that is scheduled for removal and you're just waiting for an appointment, or is it the not so dangerous type but still needs attention? What sort of cladding is it?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned this because on the day of Sir Keir's visit to Royal Artillery Quays on Monday, the cladding on our building was banned in the state of Victoria. They showed in a test done in December that it's as dangerous as the dangerous stuff, the ACM cladding.
Right.
So when our Prime Minister, Boris, is talking about 95% of the dangerous ACM buildings, he forgets that EPS is now seen as dangerous as ACM cladding, and it's been banned. So that's the type of cladding. We've got expanded polystyrene. It's the very soft polystyrene you get in a box with a TV in. It's highly flammable and very dangerous to put on a building.
So that was an Australian study, was it, that particularly classified this type of cladding as extremely dangerous?
And critically as dangerous as the ACM cladding. So what the government have done is they've created a fund for the dangerous ACM cladding. That was the Grenfell cladding. And another fund called the non-ACM fund, which boxes all the types of cladding together into £1 billion fund. Now, the problem with that is EPS is as dangerous as ACM. So I would argue it needs its own fund. And I'd also argue it needs to be significantly larger.
And what of the developers in all of this, obviously? Because, I mean, this development was, I understand, built by Barratt Homes. I understand you've had a meeting with them as well. What was the outcome of that?
Well, we were very, very pleased, actually, with the meeting. We've been campaigning now for about 4 months. And we've actually had Lord Greenhow meet Barratt and, basically work with them to try and work with us. And we had a meeting where Barratt basically said, we'll work with you to come up with a solution. And we have another meeting next week. And we're hoping to get a solution. And we think the solution will be working with Barratt and getting help from them, but also looking at where the government can also increase its funding and pay for the parts of the project that weren't compliant with current building regulation. Okay. However, I would like to say this, we believe that there was a choice the developers made between flammable and non-flammable cladding. In our case, there was mineral wool cladding called NFD. That could have been used, and it has the same thermal rating, but just different prices. And, I think going forward, we must not just consider the bottom line when it comes to building. We seriously need to consider other measures.
I've got a statement from Barratt which says Royal Artillery Quays was signed off by an independent approved inspector as meeting the requirements of the building regulations at the time of construction in 2003. They say we're sorry to hear of the difficulties facing leaseholders, and we have had a constructive meeting with them this week alongside expert fire engineers as we continue to try and find a satisfactory solution to this complex set of issues. So it feels, Stephen, that the door is still open to discussion with them. Just for a moment, though, because you painted something of a financial picture for us, what is the worst case scenario for you and your fellow leaseholders then at Royal Artillery Quays if it doesn't go in your favour and the bill lands on your mat?
Well, we had a shocking poll we conducted last year. 85 of the 485 residents were asked, what is the worst case scenario, just as you've asked me, and 63% stated they were at risk of bankruptcy. We've had people taking antidepressants. We had to talk someone with suicidal thoughts down last week. Everyone is being told to expect this huge insurance hike on top of the £6,000 a year service charge. Some people won't ever make it through to paying for the cladding. So we've had, in Royal Artillery Quays, we've actually signed up a lot of church leaders, 35 bishops, the Archbishop of Wales. The Archdeacon came down to Sir Keir's visit, and there was growing concern of the severe mental health issues around both the issues of RAQ.
You're not alone. You know, when I've touched on this subject before and spoken to people all over Greater London and the UK, in fact, who are caught in these kinds of developments and no end in sight, it's unbelievably scary and frustrating, upsetting, and all the things you've described. Just briefly, because I have to go to the news, I mean, are you at least encouraged now that there is discussion at the highest political levels? Do you feel like there's some light at the end of the tunnel here?
No, absolutely not. There isn't any light in the tunnel. They need to fund publicly all the buildings that have got the issues. They need to fix them with public funding up front and then go and get the money back for the taxpayer from the builders. And they also need to identify all the people that have been made bankrupt already and pay them and compensate them retrospectively to restore their position. It really needs to be done quickly. And we feel that the insurance industry should be publicly underwritten by the government to get rid of these huge costs right now. So it's an emergency, and the Conservatives have abstained on this issue from a vote, which is an insult to us. So no, the political situation is not sorted. And finally, I'll just say this. We're being threatened with forced loans by Michael Wade. That cannot be allowed to happen. So everyone in the media, we need you to support us as you're doing.
Well, we're certainly listening, Steve, and I'm so grateful for your time tonight. And we'll be checking in with you again soon, I'm very sure. Steve Day there, leaseholder at Royal Artillery Quays. And if you're living in a block right now as a leaseholder,